Welcome to FM Corner. I'm Danny Koontz, Director of Relationship Management for Windy City Equipment. Joining me for part two on the podcast today is Terry Byerly. Terry is the Director of Customer Success Operations for JLL and been doing this job for quite some time. We did part one last week with Terry on a little bit about his career and stuff. And today we're going to do part two and have him do some communication and talking about best practices to use for CMMS systems. Most everybody uses a version of that today. More and more people are going that way. It's the way of the world, and thought it would be great for someone who's involved in it every day, like Terry, to speak to that with us today. So, Terry, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Danny. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You bet. Let's jump right in. If someone's researching a CMMS system or platform to purchase, what are some recommendations that you have or things they need to be aware of?
Okay. And before I answer that, let me just throw a little bit in, like for everyone that's watching, they're like, all right, Terry, so what makes you the expert, right? So besides working for JLL for the last 8 years, before that, I was director of facilities at Pizza Hut. We implemented a CMMS system. So I've been through this process. So I kind of have to share with you both sides of the fence, both on the requester side and now on the provider side.
Good.
So with that, I'm going to go through a list. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are the things you should think about when you're going to go make a purchase, or maybe you're thinking of switching platforms and you're looking to see what's out there. So first and foremost, I'd highly recommend, there's a site out there called g2.com. If you haven't used it, check it out. And this is not just for CMMS. This is for any kind of software purchase that you might be making. You can see how all the providers compare to each other. You get to see reviews of people who actually use the systems day in and day out. And they'll tell you the good and they'll tell you the bad. And it makes you more well-informed when you go to make that decision. So I'll start with that. First and foremost, you should do an RFP, a request for proposal. And here are some ideas of what you could put on that RFP. Again, this is not all exhaustive, but these are some ideas that you should think about adding, and it may or may not be important to you. So when you make the list of requirements, I highly recommend to give each one of them a weight. And the reason for that is not everything is equal to you. There's certain things that are a showstopper. You got to have it or you can't use the tool. And then there's other things that are good to have. And then there's things that are nice to have. It'd be nice if you had it, but you don't have to have it. And then you give them different weights. So when you start getting the RFPs back and you start plugging in your rating for each of them on each of these questions, then you get an overall weighted score. It makes it easier to compare the providers. So once you've made that list, some of the things you can think of is consider a long-term partnership and longevity of that provider. Are they brand new? Are they a startup? Have they been around for a while? You know, what is the longevity of that provider? Be aware of future costs. And what I mean by future costs is that maybe you get up and running and then you realize, oh, they have this module that does this. I want that module. And well, that's going to cost you some money. It'd be nice to know what those modules or functions or whatever are going to cost you in the future and what is included in the base cost. What do you get for just starting with the system? Another thing is to ask them, how do they charge? Do they charge by the location, by the user, by the work order? If you do location or user, it's much easier to budget because it stays pretty consistent.
Sure.
Whereas if you're paying by the work order, that could vary, right? So in the low months, you don't have a lot of work orders. That's great. You didn't pay that much. But then you have a heavy month, maybe going into the summer. Now all of a sudden you're paying more. So it makes it hard to budget for. So just a question to ask, just so you know what you're getting into. Can you budget for this and be consistent, or is it going to vary? Ask if they offer a mobile application. So when you're in the field, and most facility managers are in the field a lot of the time, it'd be nice if you had an app so you could check out your work orders or create a work order or whatever. Ask for a demo for your industry. Because if they do a generic demo, it's not really going to showcase the cool things that they do for your particular industry. And when I say industry, I mean restaurant versus retail versus service pro versus finance, banking, whatever your industry is, make sure that they can do a demo for that. Ask if you'll be assigned a customer service executive. And if they say, what's that? Then you know you're not going to get one. And then ask what the meeting cadence is. And ask if they do strategic business reviews and how often do they do those. Quarterly is kind of the industry standard, but at least get a yearly strategic business review. If you have in-house technicians that have a van or a truck, ask if they have materials tracking, which that way keeps track of the parts that are on the vans or trucks. Ask if you can add your current service providers, or can you only use the service providers that are in their system and that you can't add to it. That was very important for us at Pizza Hut because we had some core vendors that worked on ovens, and we had to use those vendors going forward for warranty purposes. So we had to find a software that would allow us to add them.
Sure. Same at Ruby Tuesday, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you have these specialty equipment, and you've got certain people you just have to use. Ask about financial approvals. How are they completed, and do they meet your requirements or restrictions? Certain companies have certain levels where people can only approve up to a certain dollar amount, and then will that roll to the next person? For instance, store manager, district manager, regional manager, CFO, whatever that tier is, can they support that? Something more about the company themselves. Ask if they're still raising capital because they're fairly new, or are they self-sustainable? One website you could go to is crunchbase.com, and you can kind of do a little research on the different companies there. Ask if they have a support team, like a service desk, right? And what is their service level agreements? How quickly do they get back to you depending on the priority or severity of the call? Ask if they can share their historical latency data, or basically average downtime. So you can kind of estimate if it's going to go down, how long does it go, what's the history of how much it goes down. Ask if they have a scoring system for their service providers. This is very, very helpful when you want to compare how your vendor's performance is to other providers that offer that same trade. You could ask if they track certificates of insurance, COIs, and if you can track that. If they expire, then can you still send a work order to a vendor that's got expired COI? That would be a no-no. Do they offer any kind of business intelligent dashboard or AI? And then this way it makes it much easier to monitor outliers. So you're not looking at everything, you're looking at the ones that are most important to go work on. Inquire if the work orders can assign to the service provider or in-house tech of your choice, or do you have to manually go and assign work orders to a service provider every time? Big time saver if you can do a auto assign. If you're a company that has a lot of refrigeration, so grocery, ask if they have a way to track refrigerant compliances. That's a really big thing now, especially if you're, like, say, in California. I mean, they've got some extra rules beyond what the nation's restrictions are, so you definitely need to be able to track that. Ask if they offer a repair-replace algorithm, which would tell you when it's approaching time to think about replacing the equipment based off either how much money you spent on it or how old it is. And that way you can budget. So for next year, you could budget your capital based on the things to be proactive to replace instead of run the piece of equipment until it dies. That's not a good strategy to have. But if you could be proactive and know when it's time to replace a piece of equipment, very, very important. Ask if they offer a critical incident process. Another big one is QR or barcode scanning. Do they have the ability for you to asset tag all your equipment, and then when you go to create a work order, you just scan that barcode and it pulls that piece of equipment up, and then you can just put in your task. And if you decide to do asset tagging, which I highly recommend, it makes your reporting much more accurate. It makes it much easier for your local folks to create a work order. Ask if they offer an asset tagging services where they actually go out, do data collection, get your make, model, year, condition, all that fun stuff, and put that QR code or barcode on the piece of equipment for you. This is something you could do in-house, but if you want to outsource it, then ask them, do they do it themselves or do they outsource it? In other words, are they a middleman, or are you talking to the folks that are actually going to go out and do that work? Ask about integrations, and do they offer a support for your particular AP system? And again, do they outsource that, or do they handle it in-house? Or are the integrations expected that the customer writes the code for integrations? Which, if you don't have a strong IT team that's willing to do that, or if they don't have the time to do that, it's really good to know that the company you're working with can write that integration for you. Ask how long the contract commitment is. So 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. And then what is the expected price increase to be after that initial commitment? So at time of renewal. I also ask if it's going to have to renew, or you got to sign a new contract, or is it evergreen where it auto renews, but you have a cancellation policy that says, you have 90 days to cancel at renewal date, whatever. It's things you got to think about. Do they offer reports, and can you create these reports with a subscription so it can automatically send those reports to people within your company, so they don't even have to log into the CMMS. They can just get an email with an attachment, and there's the report that they need. This is great for leadership, for the higher ups that don't want to nor need to get into your CMMS. Some of the bare minimum is, you need a preventative maintenance program, a workflow. Ask about that. Ask if they offer a checklist that you could add to the PM. So just for instance, you're doing a HVAC quarterly PM, you could have a checklist of these are the things you want them to check, or even better yet, take a reading and put the reading in the response, and take a picture, or even better yet, take a picture before and after you do the PM. This is great for coil cleaning, right? How dirty was it before, and how clean did you really get it, right? Because you can't be at every store all the time, and so pictures speaks 1,000 words, right? Do they offer warranty tracking? Super, super important. I'll talk about that a little bit better on best practices. How large is their service provider offering? How many connected service pros do they have? And do they do the trades you need? You might be in a specific industry that needs a certain trade, and maybe that service provider doesn't offer, or the company, or the CMS company doesn't have any service pros that are connected. Now, you can always bring your own pros in and connect them, but that's good to know that it works in their system for that trade. Do they offer managed services like work order review and invoice review, service provider search, ops center, warranty management, system administrative services? These are things where if you're not staffed up to be able to do all of that, let's see if the company can do it for you, for a fee. And that's super important, especially in the reduction of headcount. Sometimes you might lose someone who was your system administrator, and now you can't rehire. If they offer that service, now you don't have to hire somebody, and you can let the company do it for you. Couple more here, and I'll be done, Danny. I know I'm rambling on here, but
You're good.
do they, or how many customers do they have in your industry? And ask of those customers, what's their retention rate? How long have they been with you? That might be a telltale if they only live through the initial contract and then they leave. So they have what we call a churn rate. Or have they been around for 15 years because they love the product and it works well for their industry? So something to think about. How many years they've been in business. ask for references that currently use the system, and then talk to those users. You'd be surprised how willing they are to tell you what they like and what they don't like. And you'll get that real honest feedback. You talk to a salesman anywhere, they're only going to tell you the good. They're not going to tell you the things that they're not happy with, whereas if you talk to current users, they're going to tell you. A couple more things. Do they have a customer advisory board, if that's important to you, if you want to be a part of that, and then have a kind of an insight on future changes? Do they offer conferences that you can attend and be elbow to elbow with other users of that platform? And then lastly, do they offer a not to exceed process? That's kind of a table stakes item, but the question to ask is, could that be automated? And what I mean by that is normally you might set an NTE and say, okay, if it's going to be a fryer repair, I'm going to give you a not to exceed of 500. Well, that's kind of broad. What an automated system would do is look at your history, look at what you've been paying for that task or that item, and then have the system suggest what the NTE should be, which would help possibly save you money or help you not always be getting quotes because your not to exceed wasn't high enough.
And better first time fix.
Exactly. Yes.
Sure.
Exactly.
Good.
All right. I'm done with the first question, Danny.
That's great stuff. I got a couple more here I want to ask. I want to make sure that I give you proper time to get these in. But I think the key to what you talked about with tons of information of questions to ask, it's important for the person who is looking for a system to know what you want.
Right.
And figure that out. That's a huge key is, what do you want? What are you looking to do? So once someone's picked a company, give me a few tips of onboarding.
Okay. First is to be prepared. Be prepared as much as you can before you have that first, kickoff call with the company. Like know exactly the specialties or trades that you're currently using. If you have a list of all of your equipment for every location, that's awesome. If you have make, model, serial number, and date installed, that's even better. Save you a lot of time to have that up front versus trying to go capture that after. And then know what your depreciation is in years for each type of equipment if you want to track that. Think about what priorities you want and what is the response time. For instance, emergencies. I want you to pick it up within 2 hours. I want you to arrive on site within a day, and I want you to have it completed within 48 hours, something like that. And then you could have medium priority, low priority, and just kind of be thinking about what are the priorities. I suggest you have at least 3, but you probably don't want to go more than, say, 5 or 6. That's quite a bit when it comes to priorities. But this holds your vendor responsible for when your expectations are when they need to get this done. Obviously, have an updated list of all your sites. You'd be surprised how many people struggle to gather some of this data. And alignment, super, super important. Who's the district manager and what stores do they have? What regional manager and what district manager report to that regional manager? If you have that flow and you can offer that to the CMMS company as you're deploying, is very, very helpful. I talked about not to exceed, but be thinking about what you would like that not to exceed to be for each trade or each task. Decide who you want to approve the invoices and what dollar limit they will have. This is another one that some people that they didn't really give it much thought because it was always one person approving all invoices. And now you can use people in the field to approve, like store manager can have 500, a DM could have 1,000, an RM could have 5,000, and then the facility managers, everything after that. So that reduces the facility managers' daily duties of approving invoices. Now they're only looking at the ones that are at their limit. I already talked about asset tagging, highly recommend it. Be thinking about that. And if you have in-house technicians and you want to manage their parts on the van, the parts replenishment, you might consider partnering with a parts supplier so they can help you fill those orders in the system. And the last item I have here is just to be sure to capture your operations workflow or SOPs and share that with the CMS company that you're working with. Helps them wrap their head around how you want the system to work for you.
I will tag on to that. That's great stuff. And I think for onboarding, don't just think about what you and the CMMS provider are working on. You also have teacher teams and in the field. And we did Ruby's, we did tours. We took districts and we put them in a hotel room and we went 4 or 5 hours. We went through the whole scenario. And then we tested little groups at a time. We did 80 stores for 6 months before we ever rolled anything else out, so we could figure out what we didn't do right and change it. But it's as critical to teach your teams. This is the program we're using. If you call Jim, who's not an authorized vendor, to work on your fryer, you're going to have a really hard time paying him because I'm not. And what you're supposed to do and how you go about it, and every call you place cannot be an emergency.
That's right.
And one of my roles was to go through there and kill stuff that wasn't emergencies, because that's what people did. So it's just as important to teach your team as well.
And to expand on that, and from my experience at Pizza Hut, we did the crawl, walk, run. So we started with just one district and got the buy-in from the district manager and all store managers, and then we expanded it to the region, and then we started rolling it out region at a time. Don't necessarily have to go that in depth of rolling it out. Maybe you do one region and then the whole company. But the thing is to get the buy-in from somebody, work kind of through, I don't want to call them bugs, but work through the system, work through the processes, the workflow, get the buy-in from the folks. And it makes everybody else who doesn't have it excited that, oh, I hear that this is a really good system. I can't wait to get it, versus trying to blast it out all at once and try to get buy-in from everybody.
That's how I did. I took the regional who had the 80 stores, and they traveled with me. And so we put them out there and they talked about it, and I basically say one thing. I said to our teams, if you will use this the way it's supposed to be done, in time you will love this. You will. If you are a person who likes to work around the system and not through the system, you're going to have a really hard time.
Yeah.
Like you're really having now, in whatever system we're doing.
Right.
But if you do it right, you will learn to love it. And that's really it. It's about using the system and let it work for you and help you. So my third question, Terry, for folks that already have a CMMS system, it's in place, or using it, any day-to-day operational tips?
Absolutely. And I'll keep it short because I know we're short on time here. My most important thing is you need to dedicate a person to be the system administrator of that CMMS. Don't short sell that. Don't think that, oh, I'll just have so-and-so do that on the side of their desk. It really needs to be a dedicated role for that. Couple tips is if you can build dashboards, and then build those dashboards that are custom for each type of user. So maybe, your technician might have a different dashboard than, say, a facility manager versus maybe a CFO. Give them the things they need to see and help them identify outliers, the things that they need to focus on. This is kind of obvious, but it's staying on top of the open work orders. Don't let them stay open for 3, 6, 12 months, right?
Sure.
You need to stay on top of that. And by having a CMMS system administrator, they can help with that, right? So you're following up with the vendors who haven't completed the work orders or who haven't submitted their invoices. You've got a system in place to keep that going and to keep your open work orders down. Monitor your service provider, both their quality of work and their timeliness. It's not always about money, right? You get what you pay for. If you're paying dirt cheap price, chances are you're not getting good quality, and their timeliness probably isn't that good. So take it all in and weigh it all, not just about pricing. Work with your CSE to get the most out of your investment, because there's a lot of things they can share with you, best practices, because they have many other customers that are in the same industry as you are. They can say, well, over here at company XYZ, they do it this way. And then they can just offer other ideas of things that maybe you didn't think about. And then always share with your leadership your cost savings, right? It always comes down to, is this investment we made in CMMS doing any good? You could show replacement recommendations, or how you're coming to budget, or how much money did you save because you started tracking warranty and you weren't spending money on pieces of equipment that are actually under warranty and you shouldn't spend money. Or if the CMMS has what we call a self-help system, meaning you pull up a work order and you say, my fryer's down, it asks some questions first, like, do you have any digital display on your board? Oh, yes, I do. Okay, well, we know it's getting power. Starts asking questions like that. And sometimes it might be an obvious, did you check the breaker? Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. Walk over, sure enough, it was the breaker. They flip the breaker, fire comes back on. They just saved money by not rolling a truck out to have that person flip the switch and charge you whatever, $100+ just to get the truck there. Report on average cost per work order. I think I've already talked about spend to budget. And anything else you can show where your team is making a difference because you've now implemented either the brand new CMMS or that because you switched CMS systems, where you're saving money now.
Critical. That's great information. I think, that the other key is, and I've seen this, is I had a friend, he had a system, and he called me and he said, Danny, I want to punt this. This doesn't work. Well, I knew the company. And I went, no, it doesn't sound right. Get me access to your system. So he did. And I fooled around in there for a few hours and I called him back and said, well, I got it. I would hate this too. It's too hard. It's not set up right. Never was done correctly at the beginning. If I'm your restaurant manager, I hate it too. This is not the CMS provider problem. This is your problem. You didn't do it right. And part of this is, I look at it like you hire 5 people and you put them in your office and you tell them to go to work. Well, you have to train them and you have to teach them and you have to help them. A CMS system helps you and gives you all the tools, but you have to work that and you have to be a part of it and you have to talk about it. Just had a conversation with a provider of, your first time fix is not great as a service company. Understand. Go look at the NTEs I work under, and you'll see why I can't fix it the first time. I'm out of money. I don't have enough money to fix like you talked about. And that's a problem. So you've got to put the investment in, you got to work it as well. It's not just the provider.
And the catch-22 is when you're being deployed, especially if it's brand new, you've not ever used a CMMS, is you don't know what you don't know. And some people will say after they've been on for a year or two, they're like, man, I wish I knew what I know today on day one, because I think I would have maybe rolled out the system slightly different. So lean on your CMMS provider and to show examples of how other people in your industry are using it to get ideas of how you want to deploy your system. Because if you just try to come up on your own, you're going to struggle. And at Pizza Hut, we struggled a little bit, and then we had to go back and kind of fix what we call the asset hierarchy, but how it's laid out. So it made it easier for the store managers to put it in a work order.
Exactly. It's learn and then adapt based on what you learn. But the main key issue, as you said, when you start, is try to know what you want. What am I trying to get? What is my leadership team, C-suite? What do they want? Obviously, savings. That's number one. But there are so many other pieces to that. So know what it is that you're supposed to provide.
Yeah. Start from the end and work backwards. Right.
That's exactly correct. Terry, I certainly appreciate what you do at JLL and through this CMMS systems that you guys do with Corrigo and so on. It's great. Appreciate the time. And for anybody out there in the facility world that's looking for a system, has one, or just needs tips on refining, what you gave them today will be very, very helpful.
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. Certainly
Thank you, Danny.
That's our episode for today. We appreciate you watching. Look forward to talking with you again on a future FM Cool.